All right, we are live. Good evening. Welcome to the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group's Meet a Member. We appreciate you taking time to be with us on a Friday evening. It's officially November, which means we are very close to our annual conference. 20 days. Uh, you know, um, November 20th is our field trip. 21st and 22nd are sessions. I'm super excited. I have two wonderful gentlemen with me who I get to meet in 20 days. They're both going to be at the conference. Excited about that. And before we start talking about the conference, we're going to talk to our guest of honor, Daniel Reller. But before I introduce Dan, I'm going to quickly give a quick shout out to my wonderful co host, James Badman, who's coming back after break. He needed some space from me. I don't blame him. But I'm glad he's back. Good evening, James. How are you?
Doing well, Michael. Thank you for having me back.
Always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
sorry to miss last month. We had my facility's USDA licensing relicensing inspection, and so those are always fun, and that was a whole day event. So
Yeah.
glad to be back. I hope Cameron was able to fill my chair well, and
He did a great job. I'm
awesome.
kind of trying to convince him to step in full time.
Nice. Yeah, he should. He should. It'd be a great addition. So, anyways,
Yeah,
I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
you bet. And then, without further delay, the man of the hour, Daniel Reller. Dan, good evening. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Dan is streaming in from a very, very cold part of the country, or at least the way I look at it, it's very cold. He lives in Minnesota. Did I get that right, Dan?
Yep, I'm in Minnesota, just south of the Twin Cities metro here. In fact, we've had a really warm fall. It was like 75 degrees here just a couple days ago. And then yesterday we actually had snow. Didn't stick, but bipolar weather going on here.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year, not just the winter or the fall we are experiencing, but summer too. Dan, for those of you who are not familiar with his work, he is very popular in the spotted turtle community. If you've had the pleasure of coming across his fauna classifieds ad or anywhere else he's posting, you would see people just full of praise for the quality of his hatchlings, and that kind of reflects in how he cares not just for the animals but about his people who pick up the animals as well. If you have noticed his conversations with folks, Dan focuses on smaller species, or relatively small species, not giant species, unlike our friend James, who is known for some of the giant tortoise species he works with. And we'll kind of get a peek into all the wonderful species Dan works with. But as always, I like to go back to the beginning. Where did it all start? So, Dan, if you don't mind, please tell us about your journey with turtles so far and how it started.
It probably started when I was probably between 3 and 4 years old. My dad getting me into Ninja Turtles, and then my grandpa ended up bringing a box turtle up, and we had that for a couple of years, and that turned into getting little baby painted turtles, picking those up on the road. So I had painted turtles growing up, little snapping turtles, but that's where it started. And I've got some cousins even that are into, I mean, same thing with them. They ended up with some box turtles growing up, and they both have some nice groups as well of some box turtle species.
I like that. A family that is into turtles and cares for
That's cool.
turtles. I like that. Yeah. And how old were you when it all started?
I'd say between 3 to 4 years old probably. And at that time, my dad used to have like a room, like a spare bedroom that he used downstairs, and it had some fish in there, and he had salamander, and then we had the three-toed. I'm assuming it was a three-toed box turtle. I mean, it's all good 30
Yeah.
years ago, and I kept turtles all the way up until probably 17, 18. I got totally out of it for probably 3, 4 years. And now my current wife, my parents had some baby turtles over at their house that had hatched out in their yard. She's like, "Oh, you used to have turtles?" And I said, "Yeah." And she ended up with turtles, and that was when I was 22. That's going on like good 15 years ago now, and that was just two
Well,
maps, and it just I really got into it my second time around, getting into all the other species that are out there.
nice. Now, talking about all the other species out there, and by the way, I already like your wife. I'm glad that she got back into it. I mean, that's I know that's one of those areas where people often, when they're getting into a relationship, they're always nervous how it's gonna go. I'm glad it worked out in favor of turtles for you. So,
You know,
talking about having had different species. Oh, sorry, go on.
it's a hobby that keeps you home. It keeps you out of the bar, out of the casino. Yeah,
Well, you know the memes that goes around, right? Getting kids into reptiles, they won't have money for drugs. That works for adults too, you know.
it can be
So
an expensive hobby.
that it is, especially for somebody like you and me, and even James with some of the species, when you're in a climate where you have to go that extra yard to make accommodations, it's not cheap. James often talks about water and how expensive it is. So, speaking about working with many species, what species have been part of your life up to this point?
As far as what I have had, or
Yeah,
right now,
what have you worked with so far?
so I'm only going to count species that I've kept a minimum of a year. I
Okay, fair enough.
kept western painted turtles. I've kept two different species of map turtles. I've kept softshell turtles. I kept a wood turtle once when I moved out of state. Here in Minnesota, you can't keep them. State I moved to, I was allowed to keep one. When I moved back to the state, I ended up giving it away to somebody. I've had diamondback terrapins. I've kept snapping turtles up to a certain point as far as what their size is. Three toads. Um, Obviously, red-eared sliders. I don't. There's a lot of people. I mean, that are in the turtle community that's where they started was with probably red-eared sliders.
Same here, yeah.
And then currently, what I'm working with are the Florida box turtles and the spotted turtles. Pretty new to the Spangler eye. I do have some of those, and then I also got some of the Dalmatians Herman's tortoises.
So the ones you're focusing on today, or I mean now, are the Hermans, your Florida box turtles, spotteds, and Spengler, right? Do you have
Yep,
a group of
yep,
Spengler, right?
yep. I got just a young group of them, and I stick to the
Nice.
smaller species here in the state. Not saying that you can't go bigger species. In our old house, I used to have a big 125-gallon aquarium. Our house wasn't going to be ready to move in about 6 months, so I sold my tank and my map turtles that were in there. I thought for sure I'd get back into the bigger aquatics, and I just, I love them. I think the smaller species are just simpler for being in colder weather here. I don't have the opportunity to keep things outdoors that a lot of you guys in those warmer parts of the country are able to do.
Yeah. And I think you and I were talking about that briefly. We have talked about this with multiple guests. I think working with species or keeping species that don't make it into a chore makes a big difference. You're enjoying it, and then that reflects into the care you're putting into the animals. Or you know, I think it's a win-win. Yeah.
Right. Like it just, I want to keep it a hobby. I don't want it to be a job. I need for it to be enjoyable for me. And when it comes too much, I mean, even talking like sponge filters, I know I was talking to you about that the other day. For my waterland tubs, I just use the small ones for my spotteds, and it just became almost like a weekly chore with those. I mean, the sponge filters work, but they're also a lot of upkeep unless you get a little bit deeper water. And that's where they gain more of their power being further down with the pumps that you can attach to them. And
Right.
just wasn't. I still have sponge filters in one of my tanks that has a little bit deeper water, and it does work great, but it just became more of a chore. So I went back to mechanical filters.
Well, just for my understanding, because I think I mentioned I use sponge filters. I use the aquarium co-op. They're a larger pore, so they don't get clogged easily.
Mm-hmm.
What became when you talk about it becoming a chore was the sponge getting clogged up, or was it not able to bioload able to keep up, and you had to do more water changes? What did you run into?
It was more like the bio load on there was just. I keep 3 females per tub, so I was literally doing a weekly water change in just a matter of a couple days, and I actually cut that little plastic spout that's above that sponge
Right.
down just a little bit, because even with that water level as high as it can go in those small waterland tubs, it just wasn't deep enough. And as you know, with spotted turtles, you don't want
Yeah.
that water. I mean, that's my experience with the spotted turtles is drowning is probably, and captive care is probably one of the number one causes of death for spotted turtles.
Yeah. For those of you listening and all spotted turtle keepers, if you have anything, any improvisation or tips on your enclosure design that you want to share, please put it in the comments. I'd appreciate it. Absolutely. I think yeah, when the air lift doesn't have enough height to actually create that momentum when it's pulling the air, I think it ends up not working as great. James, have you played around with sponge filters in any of your setups?
I have both at home and at ASU. We've used them, and it does. The depth does seem to play a role in it because it's that circulation of water pulling it through the sponge, and they make smaller ones. But I agree, man. They become a chore when you have to round them all up and start really kind of wringing them out and clean them and stuff. I don't do a lot of aquatics anymore, but that was always the challenge with aquatics, was trying to make it not so much of a chore, more natural. I love the live plants, the aquatic plants, and natural filtration, so that do it. But we know that aquatics can be pretty dirty.
Goes really so far. Yeah. Now, Dan, one of the questions we frequently see is people looking for filter ideas for shallow water setup. So, what have you switched to from sponge filters? What are you using now?
I went back to the Whisper Tetra intake filters.
Okay.
Only gotten out of those before is because I do use sand in my tubs on the dry side. That's what I use that's where they lay all their eggs. And what I was finding before is the turtles coming back and forth out of there was always dragging the sand back in, and that sand just eats those mechanical filters up. So what I have done is taken like almost like flat slate and built those filters up so that intake isn't so close down to the bottom of those tubs.
Nice.
And that, I mean, so far I haven't had any of those filters crap out on me. I know Mark DeSilva sent me a couple of filters too that I haven't tried yet, just because I was expecting these filters to already crap out by this time, but they haven't. So I haven't tried those filters that he sent me, and I can't remember what he had sent me, but it is different than those Tetra ones.
Nice. Yeah, sand and any grainy material definitely becomes a challenge. And I think I shared with you what I've done is, and I don't worry too much about aesthetics because pretty much nobody goes into my turtle rooms. I'm focused more on function. I've taken the Tupperwares that the filter can sit in, and then if it's super shallow, I drill holes at the top of the sides so the water can go in, but of course the sand isn't going in, and that's worked great. I'll try to get a picture and post it on a group for those who are curious. And yeah, like Chris mentioned here, I've had some turtles go. Sponge filters don't work great with Claudius. I don't know why. The fellas go sticking to the sponge filters and they go bananas for it. Um, coming back to turtles and your success with them, what are the species you have hatched till date?
So what I've had a lot of success with, I mean, my first species I hatched was a spotted turtle, and I keep a group of 2.6, and then I've also got 3 juveniles that I'm pretty sure are going to be females, and then I got 5 hatchlings right now, just waiting to go to new homes yet. And then, so last year, spotted turtles, I'm just going back to last year, I hatched 34 spotted turtles last year. This year, only 27. And then with the Florida box turtles,
Yeah.
only 2 last year and 3 2 years ago. But then this year, I had a ton of success compared to the previous 2 years. I've hatched 14 this year with several more eggs that either they were infertile or I just didn't get to the eggs in time. In fact, I just pulled 3 eggs out a couple days ago that are incubating, and earlier today, I see that I have another one digging a nest right now. And I think partly with those Floridas, I mean, I didn't know it was. I was working so hard to try to figure out what was going on with them. So I switched the enclosure up with them, and I really believe that enclosure change really contributed to success
Interesting.
with the Floridas.
Well, and I think I'm going to pick your brain about the Florida box turtles and especially the setup. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what change and the depth of the substrate. I think I was asking you about. But real quick, with your success with spotted turtles, can you give us a quick overview of your setups? If my understanding is right, looking at your videos on your YouTube channel. By the way, I'll share Dan's YouTube channel link later. Or I'll update the YouTube description so folks can check it out. You keep them in waterland tubs, right? That's worked out. I mean, 27 hatchlings, that's not a small number of hatchlings for spotted turtles. That's a healthy number of hatchlings.
Yep. So I mean, I didn't always keep spotteds in waterland tubs, but that's why I found the best way to work with them. I mean, unless you're breeding them, you could get away with just keeping them in like a 20-gallon as long as you don't have too many in there. Yeah, so I keep in the waterland tubs. I keep about 3 females per tub. Males, I got a divider in the tub. I'd like to do something else with them than using the divider. But also at the same time, having the divider where those 2 males are always like kind of looking at each other. Anytime I put them in the female tubs, they're like breeding like instantly. There's like, versus if you were to keep those males with the females all the time, just some of that drive dies off. And I don't know if 2 males looking at each other a lot or being around that increases that drive with them.
Yeah. I knock on wood, I keep 2 males in my groups, but I keep them with the females. But with Russian tortoises, especially, we have often heard of that separation and reintroduction working out better. But it's also nice for the females to catch a break, not having a female always harass them. So smart idea. Yeah.
Yeah, the females
Cool.
can't. I mean, they get so annoyed by the males. I only keep them in there for maybe 2 to 3 times per month, maybe 2 out of 3 days.
Yeah.
And that's it. I'll rotate them. So I know there's some people that ask me about the parents, like, well, I can't really tell you what the mother is or the father because they're kind of just rotating all around.
You don't have distinct groups. Yeah. Now, tell me a little bit about your hatchling setup. This is your spotted hatchling setup. I mean, that water. I mean, how deep is the water?
That's one thing I was worried about. So I used to keep them in a waterland tub. Then I hatched in one of the spares, but then I cut down on my tubs to make room for other enclosures. And I was worried about it just because the waterland tubs have that ramp, and I kind of saw that as a safety net for those hatchlings.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, I have a lot of area for them to climb up on. A lot of those plants that are on top, it's like a mini water lettuce They really like hanging out in that. And then I've got one of those turtle docks for them. So a lot of opportunities for them to get out of the water. I've not had any accidents in that water in that tank.
Nice.
It's been set up about a year now. And that water depth is probably, I'd say probably about 7 inches, which I don't recommend people doing, but I've also kept a close eye on it though too. And I mean, I've had 27 hatchlings so far this year go in and go out of that tank.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, 7 inches is something I'm not used to, and but to your point, keeping a close eye and observing the animals and their ability to get used to it, that makes a difference. One thing I'll tell people who pick hatchlings from me when they tell me they're putting it in a tub or a tank with kind of corners, right? I often see hatchlings running into those corners and keeping on trying to swim, getting out. So I've always encouraged people to either put a driftwood or something in the corners that the animal can rest on, and that's for me personally, I think that's been helpful. But
Yeah.
that's cool. I mean, congrats. I mean, 27 hatchlings, spotted hatchlings is not a small number. That I'm happy to see that many captive hatched animals are available to people who are looking for that. So, congrats on that one.
And
Yeah.
this year I probably would have had more hatch, but I had several eggs go bad during incubation process. I did change my incubator. I don't know if it's necessarily changing the incubator what happened, or I had one that hatched out and had an enlarged yolk on it. So last year I was almost everything that was laid was fertile and hatched, no problems. And then this year I've had a couple where they went bad. I opened them up long after their expected hatch time. Like, yep, sure enough, there's a baby turtle decaying in the egg.
Oof.
So that was a spotted turtles. I'll just have to try to fine tune some things for next season.
Nice. And you're having better success with Florida box turtles this year. We'll talk a little bit about that. Now, one of your newer additions is the Spangler Eye. Let's talk about that. How are you liking them so far?
I love them. They're my easiest ones to take care of. They're just not as easy to come by. You almost have to know somebody to get into them, because I mean, you see them on Fauna, they're posted and they're gone fairly shortly, or they're coming from unreputable people, and you just don't know.
Yeah.
You can buy something and something bad's going to happen. As far as
Well,
coming out of the
and
water.
that, yeah, I'm thankful, of course, Anthony and Ed and so many other wonderful people on TTPG, sharing the captive bred hatchlings and talking about it, actively promoting the captive bred hatchlings so that people aren't falling into the trap of, knowing where the animals are coming from, knowing the history definitely makes it a lot easier. I regret giving up Spangler, right? But, maybe you can't have them all. I was young and stupid. They hit a lot. I didn't have the patience for it. Now, like you said, when I wanted, yeah.
I,
James, you
I
probably remember some good times when they were cheap, or as like people might call it, dirt cheap. What's your
Yeah,
recollection? What do you remember them going for?
20-gallon tanks full of sphagnum moss, full of spangler eye, and $15 a piece.
Oh
And
my goodness.
used to see a lot of them. But
Yeah,
Arizona is just not something that likes cool and wet. Isn't how I would describe Arizona. So
yeah,
even in our winters and stuff. So yeah, just not a species I've worked with. Drew worked with them for quite a bit and had some success with those and Japonica and stuff. But I mean, it's a level of commitment to cooling and keeping
true.
wet and stuff. It you for us in Arizona, you put a lot into something like that, a species like that to work with them, and some of us just choose paths where it's a little bit easier. But I that tank was just beautiful. I love the, as we talked about before, just like a heavily planted uh,
Yeah.
tank and aquatic, and it's just a lot of fun to see that, and get to work with the plants and stuff as well.
And that's, I think, the beauty, if when you keep a species like Spengler, right, that doesn't go about bulldozing all your plants like some of the other box turtles and stuff do. you get to marry two passions, beautiful plants, Mark and Cameron, two guys that I know can think of, Anthony, of course, top of the beautiful enclosures where the plants themselves are just something to kind of sit back and admire. Yeah, it's definitely a great species to do that. This is a beauty. I don't know how old this particular hatchling is, Dan, in this picture.
Yeah, that was one that was my most recent one that I got from one of my local friends here.
Nice.
Yeah, I just keep them in small plastic shoebox loaded with wet sphagnum, and just keep them nice and humid for that first year before I move them over to more of a terrestrial setup. So I was told it's all about that shell growth. And
Yeah.
humidity gets that good shell growth on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that a setup like that, it's also beautiful. It's great. Works great for you to add pill bugs and other stuff that they can hunt on. Gives them a chance to hide as well, so they're not all getting gobbled up in 15 seconds after you drop them in there. So, um, and one of these years, we're gonna have to have you maybe come and do a presentation for us on Florida box turtles. But until that happens, I'm going to maybe ask you to take a deep dive on that particular species with me. Can we do that?
On Florida box turtles?
On Florida box turtles? Yeah.
Yep.
I don't have speculators, so I don't want to talk about them. Let's talk about Florida box turtles. And of course, like I was mentioning earlier, Dan was kind enough to donate some hatchlings to the program this year. I'm very thankful. And again, we're seeing more people get involved in our colonial propagation program. We'll talk about that at a conference coming up again in 20 days. Actually, before we take a deep dive, if you don't mind, Dan, I would like to see if James has some exciting updates for us about the conference. I hate putting him on the spot, but I keep having people ping me. I'm like, guys, I just get to keep the registrations, keep them in a spreadsheet. That's all I do. Everything else, the magic happens with Russ and James. So, James, what can you tell us?
I don't know I don't know if it's really called magic. It's a lot of the behind the scenes. It's confirmations and making sure that there's plenty of food at our events. We don't like to see people go hungry. We're super excited. Andy and Julene are opening their facility once again for us. We're spending the day there on the field trip. Jessica, Drew's wife, Jessica has worked out catering, and it's a phenomenal company, and so there's gonna be great food, and a big piece of what we do or promote is the networking, the collaboration, spending time meeting and working with each other, because we recognize the value in that as an organization, a group, because that's that it's such a big piece of what we do. And so that piece has come along great. The barbecues that night back at the hotel. Again, we have a new catering company. Again, Jessica worked her magic, and there's going to be some really good food for that. And then the conference. You've probably seen the posted talks. Russ has been posting them on Facebook, and I mean, who cannot be excited about the incubation talks? There's always that species, or there's always something we can't figure out. I often talk about it with the Chacos. I struggle with them and incubation, and so to have the best and the best of the breeders giving talks, Cord, David, Anthony, you see their successes, you've heard their successes, and it's just going to be, I'm really looking forward to seeing that lineup in those talks. And then Friday, the sidebars. I mean, it was kind of a new thing we've been running, but now, and I get it. We're lining up two of the best sidebars you can line up with, the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance, and then Ralph Till and the inaugural um, uh, uh, release of the Egyptian Tortoise Program and its group, and uh, all the great things coming out of there. And so, yeah, it sucks. We have to pick a sidebar, but I'm just looking forward to all the great things coming out of those. And I think you're going to start seeing more and more of those develop, as there's a lot of specialty. I think you mentioned earlier, we all can't do everything, but what we do, and there are a lot of people that are focused and specialized. I think we'll see more of these sidebars come along. And I know, Michael, you, Russ, and I have been talking about them, and I think in the coming years, we're going to see a lot more great work come out of those. So again, if you haven't registered, you want to do it. It's just going to be a phenomenal year. I'm looking at the registrations coming in. I know you have been at as well, Michael, and seeing all the new people that have never attended, or you see the posts on our discussion pages, and that's exciting, to get to meet people that we haven't met before. And also, if you're a student, please reach out to us. We have a lot of sponsors that do want to sponsor student registrations, and please reach out to us. A class, education is a big piece of what we do as well. We're very supportive of clubs, organizations, and classes, and the students, and we would love to give you or your group a registration if you can make it out. So please, if you've been thinking about it as a student, or like, I can get away, even if it's for a day or two, please,
Right.
Please do make it. And please reach out to myself, Michael, Russ, because the one thing you will find about our organization is the generosity. I can never get over how generous our group is, and the different programs, and the different things that we sponsor. I saw Andy sponsoring a project in South Africa on Facebook earlier today, and
Right.
you can't beat our generosity as a group, as an organization. So, but again, if you're a student, please reach out to us. We have a lot of people wanting to sponsor student registrations this year. So,
Yeah. And on top of, to add to what James said, I also want to, proudly say that we are a very welcoming group. That's the other thing. I think, I was a newbie, walked into that hotel room, 14 years ago, and here we are. I haven't missed, well, I missed one conference, which I couldn't avoid, but, here we are. And I think that's the beauty. And what you see with CPP today, you see with people like Dawson and Max and Dane working together. That's what it is, and that's a big piece, because that's gonna be the future. You see regulations and new movement to trying to restrict movement of animals coming in, whether they have merit or not, a certain limit of merit or not, whatever. We'll keep that aside. That's a separate platform. I don't want to distract from
another
my
day.
focus on Dan here. Yeah, but that is key to ensure that these animals just don't disappear. So
Sure.
thanks again for all the great work, James.
Of course.
Myself and all the attendees. I'm sure we're all very appreciative. I'm sure everybody's very appreciative of what goes into making this happen. And it's a big year. We might be looking at standing room only again this year, which I guess is a nice problem to have. We'll figure that part out when we get there. So, awesome. Thanks for that update.
Of course.
Dan, let's dive in. Florida box turtles, man. Tell me your secret. Tell me what has worked for you. I'm sure every other keeper has a different recipe for success. But for those who are not intimately familiar with that particular species, adults, how big do they get? How big are your adults?
My adults are between 4.5, and some of the bigger ones are pushing close to 6. So, and that's
These
more.
are females.
And my females, so I weighed them before I went on, and my females are actually a little bit on the heavy side right now, but I have a feeling that they have eggs in them right now. I know that there was one that was laying earlier. I kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
I feed them every other day, so I kind of you get used to how one like is supposed to feel for weight wise. Yeah, there she is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a picture from just like an hour and a half ago. Is she done laying, Dan?
You know,
Or is it still a work in progress?
I went in there and was moving stuff around, so I kind of disturbed her. I don't know if she's. I don't see her in there right now, so she might have like gave up on it for the night, and she might.
Okay.
Because I was moving stuff around, and then I had another problem I'm having is I got an egg eater in there.
Ah.
So I had another female watching her, and because I found eggshells in there in the past in my old enclosures and stuff, and one of them must like the taste of eggs. So my biggest problem I've had with the Floridas is lately, anyhow, with them producing eggs is me not getting to them quick.
Interesting. I mean, for those of us who keep Chinese box turtles, that's something we are very paranoid about because they're notorious. But I've seen that with reef turtles. I've seen that with many other species. So I don't know if this will help you with Florida box turtles, but one thing I've taken to doing is I feed my animals, depending on the species, before the nesting typically starts in a day. So, like my reefs and the flavors, I'll feed them around 2 or so. Usually, I start seeing them starting nesting around 3 o'clock. Feeding them, it's just my hope that it'll kind of keep them satisfied and not going after eggs. But it's worked this year. We'll see next year. I haven't found any eggshells. Yeah.
I fed them earlier too. I mean, just like you put a night crawler or a cricket, if they see something they really like, they're going to eat it.
So here's probably a useless bit of info, but a fun info. I went looking for Canadian night crawlers the other day, DM bait, I think, or something. They have a garlic flavored Canadian night crawler or night crawler box. I don't know if certain certain fish like the taste or smell of garlic. I don't know if anybody has any insight. I found that amusing. If you have any info on that, please do share in comments. Have you tried that? I don't know that we would need to try that with turtles, but
I was looking for worms one day, and I ended up at Fleet Farm looking, and they had those garlic worms, but I didn't even chance it. I don't know what they're exactly coated with, or is garlic in the dirt that they're in, or I just didn't try.
So, talking a little bit earlier, or a little bit earlier in our conversation, you mentioned making a switch with the enclosure seems to help with the success you are having with the box turtle. So, what do you think might have been a challenge that others could avoid, including myself? I'm building up a group. I would love to understand, what you believe might have been a challenge.
So I'll kind of start where I started with Florida. So my first Florida box turtle I got from Nick Badham. I'm sure some of you guys know who he is. I wasn't even going to get into box turtles. He came to my place and hooked me up with a Florida box turtle and showed me how to do things, keep them real wet with the shell growth and what to feed them, how to feed them. So then I ended up keeping them in those setups for about the first year, and then I moved them into like the spotted turtles. I was having success with them with the water tubs. So with the Floridas, so I got that one from Nick, and then within that year, I got 2 more from Garden State, Chris Leone. I purchased a couple from him. So I put them in the Waterland land version tubs, and I loaded that with sphagnum moss. Speaking of sphagnum, it's sure gone up in price. So I don't use as much of it anymore. I mean, I just to fill a whole Waterland tub with those now is just not going to work on for raising them that way. But
Yeah.
with the Waterland tubs, they were doing great, had great shell growth in there. I eventually moved it during the whole COVID deal. There just seemed to be a lot of short supply of that sphagnum. So I mixed my own with topsoil and some peat and some sand and mixed that up. I still kept it real wet in there and kind of humid, but the problem with having an open air setup, and I suppose I could have made a cover for them, but then you just don't enjoy your turtles as much when you can't. You got to lift in my opinion, lift the lid
all the time.
all the time. So I was like, gosh, what? I was kind of at a loss of why they seemed healthy and everything. And then I had some PVC enclosures made for me last year by a local guy, and probably within a month to 2 months, I was getting eggs, and that's what I had them in most of the year. And since then, I've actually, so they're 6 feet long by 2 feet high by 2 feet deep. There's some things I didn't like about this enclosure, and I just bought a PVC enclosure from Toad Ranch for my son got into a bearded dragon. So I got one of those setups. I really liked how they did their setup. So what set their tanks aside different than what I got before is that HDPV material, and it's really strong stuff. My old enclosures were sagging. So that idea with that PVC though is that it keeps all that heat and humidity in that enclosure, where before, when you didn't have the lid on there, that was just all escaping. And then I also had them built with a 6-inch lip. I know Toad Ranch offers that, and the guy before. So that's my old enclosure on the top. On the bottom, with 2 smaller ones on top, and it was just starting to bow. The doors are hard to open. Those Toad Ranch ones, I know they're not cheap, but I'm super satisfied with them. I had the HDPV stuff put on both sides too. I paid extra to have that to build them strong. So, and then of course I sealed them too. So that's before I added a bunch of moisture water into those setups, because right now you look at them and they're just all foggy from all the humidity. Like the humidity on the cool side is almost 90%, and on the side where the heat lamp is, it's probably around 70%. Cool side's around probably 76 degrees, and then the warm side near the heat lamp is around 80 degrees, not including that basking spot. So, I mean,
that was exactly what I was going to ask you next. Like, what temperature and humidity range seems to be keeping them happy?
Yeah, and you stick your hand in there too, and it feels like you probably don't experience it out in California or Arizona, but you just get that real muggy, icky feeling. That's kind of how it feels when I open those doors on those setups, and that's what I want. I mean, it's worth. They come from Florida, and you won't catch me in Florida in the summer.
Yeah, I felt that at the Daytona show when we were out there.
Been interested to go to the Daytona one, but the temperature's kind of like
You're biased, Wendy. Glad you could join us. And Wendy, yeah, her note, African night crawlers have been a big hit here at my end. And somebody said they use catfish or catfish using garlic flavored bait. Good to know. I got to tell my son about that. He's gotten big time into fishing. So you have a Florida box turtle nesting 1st of November. When do they usually lay? Do they lay year round for you, or what's their
like my spotted? Like? I don't know if it's got to do with the indoor keeping. My spotteds, I've even gotten 4 clutches out of some of my spotteds before. But Florida, I mean, so far now coming up on a year of good success out of them. I basically year round. I had a little bit of a break on them laying any eggs, probably about August, September, into those 2 months. But now I put them in these new enclosures, and I already pulled 3 eggs out, and I'm sure she'll lay about 3 eggs. 3 eggs as well.
Now, with that species, like your spotters, do you keep the males separate from the females and introduce them once in a while?
Yep. So my males are actually on that top enclosure that's behind me in the old setup.
Okay.
I got a divider in between them. I've got 2 males, and I even got an outdoor enclosure I'll utilize during the warmer months here. I only keep them out there though during the day. I bring them in at night. I don't have a predator-proof lid to put over them, so I'm not going to risk any raccoons or anything getting in there. And I'm sure that they have laid eggs out there, and I have found eggs in the past, but I'm sure that I'm missing eggs out there too. So
Yeah, that is one beautiful enclosure. I don't know how you'll find eggs in the. And I forget how old you said this outdoor enclosure is. Everything just seems grown in nicely, beautiful, enjoying. Yeah, that's
yeah, so
beautiful.
that brick layer, I've actually got 1 layer of brick that's dug
Okay.
down below what you can see to keep any
Okay.
digging out during the day. So I mean, within a day, I don't think they're gonna dig out. I haven't noticed them try digging out at the corners. And then of course that top lip, I've got it overhanging so they can't climb out.
Nice. That's pretty. That's beautiful. And how many months do you get to keep them in there in your state?
Um, Recently, I mean, normally probably about June, probably 3 months outside. You
Okay.
probably about mid-May, depending on the year. And heck, October this year, you probably got to. In fact, I did put them out there for a couple of days in October.
Yeah.
But I only put them out there if they're going to be supervised. If they're not being supervised, as far as somebody being home, they're not going to be out there.
I'm
It-
sorry. I got distracted by a comment on the chat there. Do you get easily embarrassed or like start blushing?
What's that?
I said, do you get easily embarrassed or blush?
No.
Here, I'll bring up the comment for you. I got to keep an eye on this guy at the conference. It's, you
Sam.
know,
He
hey,
tells anniversary.
hey, Sam.
I'm like, oh, good, because you won't distract me with your comments then.
Um, let's talk a little bit about diet for Florida box turtles. What is your typical diet for this species? What does it look like?
So my Florida box turtles, what they're mainly on. So every other day, I take my Florida box turtles and put them each of them are in their own little tubs, so I don't have to worry about any them being aggressive with each other during feeding at all. They get put in a little bit of water. So that's where they're going to be hydrating. I put some Missouri aquatic diet in there, and I put some Reptimin in there. So that's mainly what they eat. I do give them once in a while. I'll give them some blueberries in their enclosure with some strawberries. I mean, not too much, because I know that too much fruit in the diet with the turtles can cause diarrhea. So I kind of avoid giving them too much fruit. I'll get crickets once in a while. My son's getting crickets for his beard dragon. I'll put a bunch of crickets in there for some enrichment for him. Earlier in the spring, we had a lot of worms outside, and I put those in there, but they have hunted all those down. There's nothing left in the enclosure. I found that out when I did the switch between the 2 PVC tanks. I didn't find a single worm left over. And I bet you I probably threw at least 60, 70 worms in that tank from this spring when we were having all that rain.
Yeah. And what age? I think you said you picked up some from Chris. I couldn't remember if they were hatchlings or adults, but at what age roughly did you notice them maturing and starting to breed, starting to lay eggs?
So,
or at what size?
So that was back in like 2016 that I got my first Florida. I'm pretty sure it was 2016 because my son was just a little over a year. And
Coming up on 8 years, yeah.
yeah, so about 3 years. So 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I got my first eggs out of there.
Nice.
So probably around that 5-year mark.
5, 6 year mark, yeah.
it's indoor keeping though too. I mean, if you're doing some of it outside, you're going to have some of those slower months with those colder months where they shut down.
True. And some of our friends keep them pretty cool in cold environments outdoor years round. I don't know if I have the guts for that. We'll see.
And I've got a juvenile too, and that I've been holding back. He's about 2 years old now, out of my first clutch that I had, and he's showing signs of being male. He's got a little bit of a concave going on. I'm like, I don't need any more males for my group.
Yeah.
Like my two males, the one male, I love the colors on him, but anytime I put him with the girls, he beats them up so bad he'll draw blood on their shells. And my other male, which was my first Florida box turtle that I got, he doesn't do that at all. I mean, so it's kind of, do I switch that colorful male out, or how do I slow down that aggression from that other one? Because he's a little bit bigger than that other male that I have, and I hate to give him up, but eating the girls up.
So, James, I know you've handled maybe not Florida box turtles, but different species. I'm sure you've run into that. Do you have any thoughts, any tips?
I'm a fish out of water on this one. Yeah, I've not worked with Florida box turtles. I mean, we have our native box turtle, the Ludiola, and I keep some of them and deal a lot with them on the rehab side, and when we get them in and stuff, and have done that. And I had Gulf Coast for quite a while that we were able to keep. I focus on keeping most stuff outside year round and outdoor runs, and they did fairly well in our climate. That was one. When you were talking about eating the eggs, I kind of chuckled. I'm like, they were pretty bad about that too. They would hunt the other females, would dig up the other females' nests and eat them and stuff. And it was always kind of frustrating. But have you
dealt with the aggressive specimens, be it male or female, and especially males? Do you have any thoughts on how Dan or others with similar situation could use that male with females without it ending up in disaster?
That side of it we see a lot in the testudo. The males just can be bang on those female shells, do the same, chip them up and stuff, and that's where the separation and putting them in for periods of time, but also having a lot of space, putting obstacles in the enclosures, and a fair number of females. But sometimes with those and a couple radiated males we have, it's like those radiated males go through a muss or a rut or something, and just can be brutal, and it's like they go in the pen for a period of time and then you just separate them out, and where then you have other males like Dan said, it's like they're calm, they're laid back, they get along with the females, everyone's friends in the pen, but then over time you find, this one is a better breeder, or gives us real high yellow babies, or darker babies, whatever you happen to be breeding for, and you learn kind of what they throw over time, especially if you hold stuff back. And I think we all deal with it with some species or another, where you just get that one real aggressive one and have to manage it. And actually the Queelan box turtles, I do raise a fair number of those, and they were all friends until about 6 or 7, and now they're all individually housed, and it's weird. They all have their own waterland tub, and they would actually bite the shells of each other, and Cameron's got a lot of really great ideas as well. But it's just like the waterland tub wasn't big enough, and we even had the fighting between the females. So again, I'm not in Florida. I don't have massive, I can't dig down 2 feet and find water. I used a lot of waterland tubs, and they're all individually housed, but you just do a rotation of them, and find it works really well. And again, there's times where I feel like everyone's getting along great. This is going well. I'm past my period of whatever.
Whatever they had in mind.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it starts up again. So
Now, I've had some of our friends, when it comes to situations like this, they introduce the male, I think, to the female's enclosure rather than the female to the male's enclosure. I don't know if the thought is the male is in a new domain and maybe he's not going to be as aggressive. I don't know if you've tried that, Dan. Maybe if you haven't, maybe worth the shot. But some males, I guess, they're going to be. Cameron sent me a wood turtle. As soon as he was in a brand new place, it didn't matter. As soon as he saw females, he was off running, doing what he was doing, and the reason the previous one I gave him up. So, yeah.
Well, I even had 3 males, and then I put the 3 males even all out together with the females out in the outdoor enclosure, and I would find all 3 male Florida box turtles fighting with each other, even though the girls were in there. All 3 of them, those males, would find.
That's good to know. I'll have to keep an eye. I know so my group is very young, hatchlings or 2-3-year-olds max, I think, and I've seen some aggression. I've had to separate animals already. Hopefully that's not a long-term thing.
One obstacle, I know the visual barriers do help, and I do notice a little less of that happening outside, but then indoors, I spent a lot of money on different plants, trying different things inside the enclosures, but they just get trampled.
Oh yeah.
So just trying to find something that will last longer. Whether it's I've tried keeping stuff in pots too. I don't know if maybe I find a taller type of pot, and then so they can't get at the plant. But that's kind of where I'm heading with the plants anyway.
Yeah.
I don't. Oh, sorry. Go on, James.
I was just gonna say, yeah, no, it's always a struggle indoors. I do keep a lot of tortoises indoors and trying to keep plants going, whether it's, again, I work a lot of drier stuff. So we try to keep the sedum and other succulents going for them. And it's always a challenge, but you can't say your outside pen doesn't have enough visual barriers. I mean, that was beautiful. It's heavily planted and, a lot of space. And I think if they're just have that personality, they're just going to be
changing it.
Yeah, it's just going to be a brute,
They're beautiful animals. So,
forgot to mention, I do offer my Florida box turtles cuddle bones. And the females chow them down like their food almost, and I mean that keeps that beak trimmed down.
Yeah.
The 3-toads, I mean, in Easterns, probably in your North American box turtles, it's going to be important to keep something like that in their enclosures.
And talking about side breaks, plants are not working out. Logs of wood, or driftwoods, something to think of. That's what I'd resort to. And thankfully, from our lake, I've been able to find or recover some nice big pieces that go into my Herman's tortoise pens, Russian tortoise pens, and box turtle pens. It's been helpful again because plants, especially when it comes to indoors, they just mow through it. Or you put in a pot. I guess it needs to be a big pot, which then in a 6-foot enclosure that becomes challenge because it's taking up space. So you put it in a small pot, they just push it down. I have that with my Rosa now. I keep on trying something every day. So yeah. Breeding incubation. How long does it take from the time they lay eggs, or what is the incubation period for this particular species, Dan?
I'm finding it to be pretty darn close to the spotted turtles, between 50 and that's a spotted turtle hatching there. And I don't use that type of medium for the eggs anymore. I didn't have very much even though there's one hatching there. I didn't like it. It's that hatch right stuff. Those are 3 that hatched out this year.
Nice.
But 50 and 55 days. I set it at 84 degrees. Is what I'm finding. them to be hatching at. Sometimes a day or two earlier than that, and sometimes a couple days after that time frame. But usually around that, about a month and a half on the incubation on there.
Nice.
And I do set it high for females. Maybe I get enough eggs, or in future I might incubate for males too, because I know that it just seems to be. I know there's a lot of people that are looking for females, but then you also need to get some males out into the community as well. Can't just be
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, from animals I've received from friends, I seem to have a decent mix. But that's the beauty. Again, a quick note about our killer and propagation program. When you end up with more than one or more than animals of a specific sex, you don't need them. Please contact Cameron so we can send those animals that you've lovingly and caringly raised to somebody else who's in need of that specific sex. Again, another area where that program is helpful. So please do reach out to him. And then I know we are on coming up on an hour. I know you go to work in the middle of the night, so I'll try to let you go. One last question: how do you get your Florida box turtle hatchlings going? How do you set up the hatchlings? Give them a good start.
So the hatchlings. So I've tried two different methods on it, and I'll kind of go over both of them. What I have found the most successful for myself is putting them on wet sphagnum, just like the Spangleri. In fact, I put them inside. I actually have them inside my Herman's enclosure inside that plastic shoebox. So I know the Hermans
Gotcha.
aren't going to bother them at all, other than just kind of maybe coming over and checking them out. But they get the warmth from the tank in there, the humidity too. And that's how I keep them for about the first year. And then I move them into a little bit bigger enclosure, but still I keep up with that humidity. I tried the aquatic setup. I know there's a lot of guys that have great success with that. I tried it, and I felt like there was too much of a risk of drowning, even with that shallow water stuff to climb on. At least with the sphagnum moss, I'm not going to have that accident happen. Because when I was doing it this year, trying the aquatic setup, trying something different, I did have one that I looked in there, I'm like, you see the typical floating, like, oh shoot, it drowned. That one actually survived. I don't know how it survived. I thought for sure was dead, but after
Wow.
okay, I'm done with this aquatic stuff. But I know that there's a lot of guys out there that keep them aquatic like that and have great success with it. It just, you also got to do what works for you and what you're finding success with. It's almost like PTPG last year is like, I like to call it like a melting pot of different ideas, and you take a little bit of advice from this person and that person, and you kind of make it your own, what works best for you and in the animal's best interest.
Right. And like you said, it's something that works great for somebody doesn't necessarily translate into success for somebody else. It depends on the individual animals at play, their attitude, their whatever it is they're thinking. Like I said, even I had one Chinese box turtle hatchling drowned this year. Shallow water and Chinese box turtle hatchlings, for those who know, are not animals that struggle to turn themselves over. But this one, yeah, it didn't happen. Um, yeah. But for clarity for those who are listening in and taking notes, picking and trying to replicate, the hatchling, you have them in a shoebox, kind of a container filled with moss. Do you have a lid on it, or is it open so it's exposed to the UV bulb in the enclosure? Can you clarify that?
So what I've done with hatchlings, in the past I've had them like like something like you see behind me. I've had them on top because heat's going to rise, so they're going to get that warmth from down below. And that's some advice that McBadam gave me back when I started with Floridas. So I used to keep them that way, open top, but I'd always keep the substrate real wet. UVB, when they're little like that, it's not as important. They're going to get get some of that calcium and vitamins from dusting some of their food. Um, or I get all the hatchlings on pellets too. So, but what I have them in now is on lids, and I don't find the UVB to be as important during that first year, and I get awesome shell growth out of there, out of those box trees.
Yeah. And again, of course, just for the record and make sure people aren't misunderstanding that statement about UVB not making a big difference in the first year. That's boxes. Again, we're talking about box turtles here, or a species, hatchlings that tend to be very secretive that in that formative years, if you will, that hide a lot. Even though people find them, they're not out there sunning a lot. But
Oh,
again, you know,
they're
if
gonna
you provide UV as well, it's not going to hurt. But again, I want to clarify that so that it's not taken out of context.
right. Like you'll never probably find a baby box turtle in the wild. They're gonna be buried under the leaves and under all that leaf. All that dirt and stuff. Where you're not gonna find a baby box turtle like you would like a baby painted turtle sunning themselves in a log. I know some people
Yeah,
find box turtles in their in-ground pools in those states that you guys do get box turtles where they've crawled out there, but I mean the natural nature of them is they're gonna stay hidden out of sight
so
until they get
they
some
don't
sight.
become food. Yeah. Well, that was great. And that's all I can think about questions to ask you about that particular species. I hope for those who are curious and interested in the species that's helpful. And again, please hop in on comments. Uh, we don't really monitor comments in our YouTube channel a lot, but if you have questions for Diane, please hop on our Facebook group. He's there, he's active. Please post any questions. Um, Dan, any parting thoughts?
Um, it was great for you guys to have me on here. I'm super excited attending my second TTBG. It's about, what is it, 18 days away now?
Yeah, yeah.
And for anybody that's watching, if you haven't been there, I it is an awesome place to go. Great group of people to network with, share ideas. It's you got to go to experience it at least once. It's a blast.
We have some amazing people making their way to the conference this year. I'm excited. I don't want to just drop one or two names because there are so many amazing people coming. And I'm not sure if James, if you find yourself in that position, but our conference has grown. So many wonderful people, so many people who have become friends. I mean, it's now beyond just caring about not having the common interest of just turtles. It's much more beyond that. I struggle to find time to sit down with everybody. It's like I make my way there on Tuesday, and there's still not enough time to sit and grab a drink with everybody or grab a meal with everybody. If you have any pro tips, please share.
I
It
don't. I
just goes
don't.
by.
It goes by too fast, and you just don't sleep. You talk to the wee hours in the morning, and and you can do it every night, and the dinners are great, the lunches are great. It's just hanging around people and taking it all in, absorbing it, and so and certainly looking forward to it. And like I said, this
Yeah.
year we just have an exceptional lineup of speakers. Russ really worked hard on this schedule, and it's really good.
Awesome. Yes, we're just 18 days before we start boarding the flight. Um, for any of you who's listening, if this is your first time and if you don't have friends in the hobby who are there, please feel free to come and say hi, introduce yourself to myself, James. And when it's lunchtime, dinner time, please find one of us. We would love to take you out with us, have you join us. Please don't be shy. I truly mean it when I say we're a very welcoming group. You will experience that in person. But yeah, please don't be shy. If you could use some company when you're out there, if you're visiting by yourself, please find one of us. We'd be happy to have you with us. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Again, I appreciate you start working in the middle of the night. I appreciate you taking the time to hang back with us this evening and share some of your experiences with Florida box turtles, especially. Looking forward to seeing you in person soon, and saying hi in person. So I'll see you both, and of course, many of you who are listening. Looking forward to seeing you all, in 20 days. I'll, you know, Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for joining us. And yes, the bus rides are great. The field trip. And I know some of you, again, just quick note about those who are in the waiting list. If you're anxious, I promise you will hear from me within a week. We wanted to see where we landed by now, but first, here we are. So give me a week. I'll send every one of you an update. So thank you. Thanks, James, and
Yeah,
everyone.
thank
Have a
you.
wonderful weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you. See you later.
Thanks, Dan.